If you're a digital nomad living across the world, then a question that you're going to have to answer at some point is where are you going to set up your business? Now, for normal people who just live in one place, this is usually pretty straightforward. You just set it up wherever you live. But what if you don't live in just one place? Or even if you do live in just one place, but the place where you live is a developing country like Indonesia or Thailand, there are a lot of reasons why you might not want to set up your company in the country where you mainly stay. For example, Indonesia requires an investment of $600,000 in cash into your company in order for a foreigner to legally be able to operate a company in Indonesia. And in Thailand, full foreign ownership of companies is not even allowed at all. So the next option you might consider is simply setting up your company in your country of citizenship. And while this can work and a lot of people do it, often this is also not the best option. For example, your home country might continue to tax your company even if you don't manage it from your home country anymore, which makes it not the best option to set up your business. So in these cases, the business structure that I often recommend for most digital nomad is the US LLC, which is basically a limited liability company registered in the United States. And I know that that statement is going to prompt a lot of questions from you, like why is the US LLC a better option than simply setting up in my home country? Does this mean I have to pay US corporate taxes? What about taxation in the countries where I live as a digital nomad? Will this give me a US bank account? And how do I even set this up? Like, do I need to go to the US physically or have a US address to be able to operate a US LLC as a non-US citizen? So I can answer the first question straight away. No, you do not need to travel to the US. You do not need a US address or anything like that, because you can use an agent like Dula, who I use personally and who I believe are the best in the business, to set all of this up for you. They will essentially handle all the government filings for you. You don't need to fill any government forms. They're going to get your company address for you. They're going to ensure that your company is fully compliant and you can get started with it for as little as $300 a year. I will go over this in more detail later on in the video, but just be aware that I will leave Dula's details down below in the description with a special 10% discount code only for the people who go through my link down below in this video. But first we need to discuss why specifically is the US LLC the recommended option for digital nomads. So first we need to consider why set up a US LLC versus setting up in the country where you mainly live. Well, mainly it's because of those reasons that I sort of touched on before. You might have investment requirements, you might have requirements about foreign ownership. Not every country even allows foreign ownership, and in general the infrastructure around the business might simply not be as good. We can see, for example, from Stripe, the most popular payment processor for businesses around the world, is that it only supports 46 countries. So you might literally not be able to access it if you set up your business in the country where you live, if it is a more developing country. Also, the banking you might be able to get access to may not be that good. It may be a hassle to get it open if you're not a local, things like this. Now, why set up a US LLC over setting up in your home country? Well, again, it might be a decent option to continue to have your Australian or your German or your UK company, but in most cases it is still not the best option. And I'm generally of the principle that you shouldn't just go with an okay option, you should go with the best option. The bigger issue usually is taxation. Now, most countries, a lot of countries, or dare I say even most countries, will tax all companies that are registered in that country regardless of whether you run the company from that country. For example, if you have an Australian company, Australia might continue to tax your company even if you don't live in Australia, which is sort of useless. Like, you might not want to do that, obviously, if you're no longer benefiting from the Australian system. And this is why for tax optimization as a digital nomad, you specifically want a company that is what we call tax neutral, meaning that the company of registration gives you access to all the things you want, like good banking, payment processing, good infrastructure, but the country of registration does not automatically tax that company if you do not live in that country. So it leaves you to only have to worry about taxation in the countries where you spend time / where you live, because you might also have a case where you, let's say you have this Australian company that is taxed in Australia, but you also become a tax resident in the country where you live. Well, now you sort of have to deal with two tax systems at the same time, and it can not only become expensive, but also a bureaucratic nightmare that you might not have to deal with. With a US LLC, the core benefits are threefold. Number one, you have the taxation, and this is the biggest one. The US specifically does not tax non-US resident run US LLC. In fact, in the United States, the LLC is what is called a pass-through entity. So it's not even able to file a corporate tax return because by US law purposes, this US LLC is not a company in the same way as like a C corporation is, where it doesn't file taxes on its own, but rather all the profits from the US LLC are automatically distributed to essentially pass through to the owner, and the owner of the company is supposed to report this income in their personal tax return. So if you run this US LLC from outside the US, crucially, you're not going to have any US tax liabilities. However, the big thing to note here is that that doesn't mean you don't have to report anything. There is some forms that you're gonna have to file, and if you don't file them properly, there are some very big fines that can go up to $25,000, which is why, again, I highly recommend you use the services of a professional agent who can handle all this for you, who have done this hundreds of times, so they're definitely going to do it correctly. I do not recommend trying to do all of this yourself if you are not a tax expert, which is why I use Doula Services, and specifically you want to go for one of their higher plans, such as the Total Compliance or the Total Compliance Max plans, which includes all of the filings they're going to have to fill. Again, you're not going to have to pay taxes, but you are going to have to report your income and certain things and things like that. So the second reason to set up a US LLC is to get access to US payment processing and US banking. Again, if you have your Indonesian company, you might not be able to get back payment processing. Who knows what the banking is like? So you want to get access to good banking, good payment processing, especially if you're selling your services in the West. It's going to be much easier for Western clients to deal with a Western company. And the US is generally the best country in the world in terms of doing business, all these financial services and everything like that. It is still the king in all of these things. And while you might not be able to open accounts at some of the more traditional banks, you do have access to EMIs, like for example Mercury, that specifically allow you to open accounts there even if you as the owner are not a US resident or a US citizen, where you do not need a US social security number. You are going to be able to open a US Stripe account. I mean, I run a US LLC myself. I've been doing it for the past 2 years and I have had zero issues, and I have not set foot in the US even once during this entire process. And reason number 3 is legitimacy. Now, a big thing to consider that most people might not consider when you're doing business is that if you have a client and you invoice your client, you tell them to send money to your company's bank account, they might think twice if they're having to send money to a bank account in Georgia or in Vietnam or something like that. But they're not going to think twice about sending money to a US bank account because reputation does matter. People are very used to sending money to US bank accounts. Payment processors and credit cards are used to being charged by US companies. In terms of how to set up this US LLC, of course, I'm not going to lie, you can do it all yourself. You can go and research what's the best state to set up in. Usually it's going to be Wyoming. That is where I have my US LLC. You can go to the Wyoming government website, find the correct forms to set up your company, file the application for your employer identification number and everything like this, and spend tens or even hundreds of hours figuring out what's the best option, what are all the forms you need to do and everything like that. But if you're a business owner, you probably don't want to spend your time doing that. Your time is probably much better spent simply making money and letting an expert handle all of this for you. And that is of course where a service like Doula comes in. It was a no-brainer for me to use them. They will get your employer identification number for you. They will set up your company with the state. They will handle the state filing fee, everything like that. And if you choose either the Total Compliance or the Total Compliance Max plan, which I highly recommend, they're going to remind you of all the forms that you're going to have to fill throughout the year. They're just going to send you like a form by email, like, hey, you need to fill this up. We'll take care of it from here. In terms of banking, most likely, unless you are a US citizen, the bank account that you're going to use is called Mercury. I'm going to leave a referral link down below in the description. The way it works is that it's technically not a bank. It's like essentially a software layer above Choice Financial, which is the bank that they actually hold your money in. But regardless, all of your funds are insured through the US Federal Deposit Insurance Scheme up to, I believe, $250,000. So you don't have to worry about anything in that front. And so far it's been working extremely well. I've been sending money to all kinds of countries using my Mercury debit card, everything like that, and I have had zero issues. So I highly recommend you use that bank account if you are opening a US LLC. So that is broadly why the US LLC is such a great option for digital nomads. To recap, it is a tax neutral setup. you get excellent business infrastructure and great legitimacy while being extremely affordable and easy to set up if you use the proper agent. Obviously, I welcome you to do all of your own research. I simply came to the conclusion that doula was the best option, and that is why I recommend them. But this is always a case-by-case decision. There can be cases where you might even want to have multiple companies. For example, myself, I run a UAE company and a US LLC at the same time. Now, if you're wondering why and whether these cases apply to you, then I highly recommend you watch this video right here where I explain why for my situation, a UAE company and a US LLC is the optimal structure that gets me 0% tax legally. So watch that video next, and I will see you in the next one.